and welcome to my vlog exercise for WPS2921 Intermediate International Relations. Today's issue is one that is dear to my heart as a queer identifying person, and one that I as such will approach with appropriate gravity. Queer people, i.e. those that identify with the two-spirit LGBTQI+ community, have long faced discrimination from both their own family and their broader community, in addition to their own government, militia groups, and foreign state actors. Even though they have long faced this disproportionate violence during peacetime, that is not the topic of today's video. Instead, we are going to talk about the substantial danger to life and security faced by queer people during conflict and post-conflict situations, which exponentially increases when compared to peacetime situations. The primary actors in this instance are naturally those queer people faced with violence, both sexual and physical, as well as the governments who can both discriminate against and provide sanctuary for those queer individuals. Additionally, substantial violence is undertaken by militia groups, terrorist organizations, and community organizations, and while these reprehensible groups will not, and indeed should not, have a seat at the table, they are key to understanding the complex dynamics associated with this issue. Evidence of violence against queer people in conflict environments can be found around the world, with notable examples in the Middle East, in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, in Europe, in the eastern Ukraine, throughout sub-Saharan Africa, and conflicts in the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Kenya, and there exists multiple examples in the Americas, such as in Peru or Colombia. This violence has included such atrocities as summary executions, forced disappearances, mass displacement, and sexual violence, including human trafficking and the act of corrective rape. To understand the gravity of this issue, it's imperative we turn to numbers. About 5.6% of the adult American population identifies as queer, and if we were to extrapolate this number to the global population, which was about 7.8 billion as of the 1st of September, we arrive at a number of about 440 million people, which is equivalent to roughly the entire population of the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada combined. Now, of course, this is a truly massive portion of our global population, and one that has minimal protection under international humanitarian law, and to date, no state-based international enforcement mechanism that seeks to improve their safety and quality of life during conflict scenarios. Naturally, the best international institution capable of enforcing any proposed legislation would be the United Nations General Assembly and its associated organizations. And so today I will outline a proposal to create a state-based framework designed to promote the protection of queer people in those conflict situations, modeled on but distinctly separate from an existing UN initiative known as the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. And while there has been substantial progress made in rights for queer people under international human rights legislation, the international legislation that covers instances of conflict, namely the international humanitarian laws of the Geneva Convention, does not clearly stipulate protections for queer people, and inferences for their protection can only be found under the similar criteria outlined in Article 3 of the Geneva Convention. And as such, we turn to the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, which was founded under Security Council Resolution 1325, and strengthened under 10 further UN resolutions. It serves as a framework to prevent violence against women and girls, to ensure their participation in the decision-making process, protecting their rights, and ensuring that appropriate resources are directed their way in post-conflict situations. However, there are some limitations in extending women, peace, and security to queer people. With its focus primarily being on women and girls, it covers some but not all of the queer population. This is evidenced in Security Council Resolution 2106, which is part of the Women, Peace and Security Framework, in which its attempt to broaden the scope of their activities to men and boys explicitly failed to include queer people. Indeed, there is substantial literature that agrees with this assessment, noting that Women, Peace and Security's architecture, which is kind of around gender mainstreaming, can be a force of oppression and erasure of the LGBTQ experience, as written in this lovely article here. As such, it can be argued that the creation of a new framework borrowing the successful aspects of the WPS architecture, but with a clear focus on queer individuals, is necessary. And so, just as the Women, Peace and Security agenda was constructed on the basis of UN resolutions, there are existing UN resolutions through which we can pursue the establishment of a queer security framework. There is, of course, the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which has affirmed that queer people have the same rights as everyone else on this lovely planet of ours. And the UN Human Rights Council has several resolutions which guarantee human rights based on sexual orientation and gender identity, and the protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Additionally, the UN General Assembly has passed a resolution which has had many forms, preventing the extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary execution of any individual based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. And so, building on this existing precedent, the UN General Assembly can pass a new resolution establishing a framework encouraging countries to develop national action plans based on queer security, similar to the Women, Peace and Security national action plans that are currently in existence. However, an important caveat must be discussed. There is very minimal hope of changing some prevailing attitudes in many UN member states. Indeed, same-sex relations are criminalized in 67 UN member states, and execution is the punishment for conviction in 6 of them. Key to the current Women, Peace and Security framework, however, is protecting women in post-conflict situations in which they are displaced from their home countries. And similarly, any framework protecting queer people in this environment should be centered around protecting those individuals who flee from those conflict environments or states in which they are persecuted. And so another question then arises from that. Why should we institute a system that is only going to be adhered to by states that are already friendly to queer rights? And that is a very valid question. My retort, however, would be this. Instituting a queer security framework would provide queer people with something they don't currently have, and that's the ability to hold individual governments to account. Because many of these governments, they are signatories to international conventions that guarantee queer rights. However, those are the words that they've signed on to, not the words that they have developed themselves. If they are developing their own national action plans on this topic and not following through, it gives queer people something to hold them to account on. It is their words, their plans, their proposed actions that they are not fulfilling. And that brings us to the end of our video today. Violence against queer people in conflict situations is often brutal, and there exists no concrete international institution designed to mitigate and combat that crisis. And so I think it's time that the UN finally took concrete action to develop a framework to do so. And in doing so, they would afford queer people the dignity that they deserve in the international sphere. Thank you. I am Liam Reynolds, and this has been my vlog exercise for Government 2921 Intermediate International Relations.